Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Unfiltered Vet Discussions. And this is going to be totally unfiltered. Today, I'm being joined by myself. I'm flying solo, so it's definitely going to be more unfiltered than when I have three or four people overseeing me. If you'd like to learn more about us who are on the Unfiltered Vet Discussions, you can read our bios at www.unfilteredvetdiscussions.com. And please make sure to do the like and the subscribe and the follow us on the social media platforms listed on our website. You can also listen to us wherever you find your podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify. We love to hear from our listeners. So please make sure to comment, let us know how we're doing, and we will respond. Now, you're used to a whole bunch of American accents. And sometimes I just get tired of hearing the same old voices. So today, our topic is what's going on down under. And my guest is Dr. Sam Bowden, co-founder and CEO of Accelerate Practice Academy. Dr. Bowden is a veterinarian, a graduate from the University of Queensland, former veterinary hospital owner, currently a coach, consultant, influencer, and he's using my word. He's a disruptor. Let me quote from his bio. From the start, Sam had a gift for building revenue and profit. He grew a mixed animal practice from zero profit to 160,000 a year in 3 years. It was no fluke because later he bought another practice turning over 170,000 in a low socioeconomic region and built it into one of the fastest growing practices in Australia, achieving one of the highest profit margins in a vet practice in the Southern Hemisphere. He sold his practice for many multiples of what he paid. And now all of that knowledge, all of that expertise, all of those t-shirts and tattoos that he accumulated in being successful, he teaches, he coaches, he leads, and he helps others become successful. His model, his message, you can increase profit quickly without increasing your overhead, even in the toughest economic times when you know how. And Sam, I want to know how, but more importantly, welcome to the podcast. How'd I do with the intro?
Geez, Peter, I think that's pretty generous. It was funny. I was given a shirt by a friend who was in the UK the other day, and I hold it up there, but it says, "In my defence, I was left unsupervised." So I was actually listening to that, and sometimes you don't see you see yourself very differently to other people. So it was a lovely intro. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Well, Sam and I have known each other in superficially and more deeply over the years. I don't know if we've ever physically met in my trips to Australia. Sam actually did a consult at the practice my daughter worked at when she was in Australia, beachside. Um, but let's kind of start at your beginning. And many people in the United States know when they're about 5 or 6 or 10 that they want to become veterinarians, but we kind of have to go through the high school and then the undergraduate and then into veterinary school. But it's much different in Australia and many of the other countries. Did you know, young early on that you wanted to become a veterinarian, or were you looking more at Australian rules football or becoming part of the Olympic swim team?
Well, we can rule out the last two pretty quickly. Um, I, I I don't think I'm your typical mold of a vet. I remember I did actually at university. So at university you could go straight into vet school back in the day, but I did human movements, which is like almost sports physiology for the first year because I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I got very good marks. And at the end of the year, I had good enough grades to pretty much go into whatever degree I wanted. And I considered doing medicine, human medicine, and decided that I didn't want to because, I just couldn't bear the thought of being around sick people who are kind of down. I tend to be a sort of positive and pretty happy bloke, and being around people that are sick and that just didn't really tick the box for me. So I grew up in 36,000 acres on a sheep and cattle station, so I had sort of been around animals all my life, and I heard that vet school had really good parties. So when you've got no other idea what you're doing, well, you kind of come from that background. It's good parties, big fat tick, and believe it or not, that's how I started doing vet.
So you went to veterinary school because of the parties. For the listeners who are out there, I want you to go back and ask yourself how many of you went to veterinary school because of the parties? And put that in the comments because I don't think that there's a freaking four of the 4,000 veterinary students that are out there currently. Any of them went for the parties from that standpoint. So thank you for your candor and your honesty. Now, the vet school curriculum at the University of Queensland, we all learn about the medicine. What about the business side of things in veterinary school? And did you get much in terms of business education and how much? So it's a multi-phase question because I think you'll tell a story from it anyhow. So vet school education, if any, on business, into ownership, how long did that take? And what motivated you to become an entrepreneur? So the floor is yours after all of that jabbering.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to being a young fella. I I was actually always interested in being an entrepreneur before I even knew what the word meant, and I think that came from my parents. Growing up in a sheep and cattle station, and they always encouraged us to have our own little businesses. So we used to do things like we grew or had a veggie garden, and I would sell the veggies to my parents. So obviously we had lovely fresh veggies, and I was making a couple of bucks from it. And then I had chickens, and I used to buy the chickens and buy the feed, and then I would sell the eggs to. It was $1 for 12 eggs, or no, $2 for 12 eggs, and I would sell them to my parents or anyone in the district who would feel a bit of sympathy for me. And also we had like orphan lambs, and we used to then raise them. Would feed them milk, and would raise these lambs, and then we'd put a certain ear tag in. We knew they were ours, and so when shearing came around every year, we could work out how many sheep we had, and we got the proceeds from the wool. So I guess we were sort of encouraged to start thinking about being entrepreneurs and trying your own little business. But when we got to university, and I don't think I would be a unicorn in this, we had zero, and I mean zero business education. Um, so, you know, so we sort of finished uni, I graduated, flew overseas the next day because that's what all Australians do. They finish uni and go straight to the UK, or they used to, and go and make all your mistakes over there. No, we just went over there as it's kind of a rite of passage. You go and do a year or two overseas because we can easily get a visa there, and and that was a fair leap of faith because I had no idea what I was doing. And I can remember I actually worked in a pub for 6 months, and then went, hey, I've done a year degree. I probably should go and use it. So I was working in this lovely practice with these as a locum, no idea what I'm doing. And bless their cotton socks for vet nurses, because or vet techs, I would not have got through if it weren't for them, because they stayed in the consult room with me and pretty much did the first lot of consults till I figured out what was actually going on. So I returned home and said to this employment agency, right, I need to go work at a practice. And I said, I want to work in a 3-vet practice that is a mixed practice where I can play polo cross, which is a horse sport that I was playing back in the day, and is close to surf. And I remember this employment agency saying, gee, you don't ask for much, do you? And maybe there's a little life lesson in that. If you're not clear on what you want, then you won't ask, and therefore you won't get. So I worked in that practice for 2 years, and at the end of it, my boss said, all right, I'm out. I'm stopping, and I'm either going to shut the practice or you can take it on if you like. So I thought about that and I went, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this practice on as my business education, and I'd give myself a runway of 2 years. And I thought, if I can't make a go of it, and at the time it was making zero profit, if I can't make a go of this within 2 years, then I'm happy to go and shut the thing down, go elsewhere, because I'm just not prepared to be working and not doing well financially. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, and I jumped into it. And the first thing that I did, I remember I went, okay, I've been learning from my boss who doesn't know how to run a business because there's no profit. So the first thing I did, I went to non-competing areas and sat down with the most successful business owners that I knew in the vet space. And I just literally, I went and said, can I buy you lunch? And can you tell me what I need to do? How do I need to run this practice? What do you do that makes you successful? And Peter, I'm sure you found this, but successful people tend to have a joy in actually helping someone who's got a bit of enthusiasm and wants to have a swing. And they just gave me everything. In fact, they even bought me lunch. I was meant to pay for lunch. So it kind of helped me get a leg up. And within 2 years, we'd turned that around. And, it went from no profit at all to becoming a really profitable practice. And I had the most wonderful time over there in Western Australia. I was surfing, I was playing polo cross with my mates. In fact, I'm in just a little regional country town, and I'm still good mates with a lot of farmers there. In fact, a couple of years ago, I went on a 16-day motorbike trip throughout Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos with these larrikins, and it was pretty good fun. So I guess that was my forage into business, that I put myself into the boiling pot and said, well, I'm going to have to figure this out.
All right. So first question as a sequel to that, what's a larrikin?
A larrikin is a pest, someone who's good fun. They're always in for a joke. They don't take themselves too seriously. I call them very high quality people because they're just, there's people you're around, you walk away and you feel enthused, you feel kind of a bit lighter. It's just because they're enjoying every moment of life, regardless of what's going on.
So is that what it says on your t-shirt? Okay. So the answer from your first answer in summary is graduate, work in a pub, make sure your nurses know how to run things so you can just pretend to be a doctor, be clear about what you want so that you can end up where you are, and then surround yourself with successful people who will ultimately help you become successful.
You're probably the last one's the only one that your listeners actually need to do. The other ones were just good fun.
Yeah, very cool. So you did it once and you said to yourself, okay, I can do it once. I can do it a second time. How'd that work? Was it easier the second time around? Was it harder? Was it different? Talk about that becoming what could you take the model from number one and just emulate it in number two? Just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was interesting, Peter, because I don't tend to do things the traditional way. The term disruptor, I don't know, I think I like the term. I think it's more about looking at things differently and questioning, why do I do it that way? Do I just do it that way because everyone else does? So my path has been a bit different. Um, my second practice, now I don't recommend any listeners do this either. I bought it sight unseen while I was spending 6 months surfing in Central America. So I'm in Costa Rica with my girlfriend at the time. And by the way, hey, this is a little marriage tip for anyone. If you want to know if someone's a fit for you, here's a really good litmus test. You go traveling and you go to places, and we spent about a year traveling, and you go to places where you're really not familiar with the language or the culture, and you get yourselves lost, sick, and then if you're still able to get along under that sort of under that test, it's a pretty good litmus test. They're probably going to be a pretty good life partner, and it worked out for me. So anyway, I bought this practice sight unseen. A friend rang me up, and unfortunately, there's a vet that had deceased, and this practice was available out of deceased estate. He said, "Do you want it?" And I went, "Oh, I don't know." And one of my mates who was a vet, he flew down, had a look at it for me and said, look, I think it'll need a bit of work, but I think it'll end up being a gold mine. And at the time, I think it was turning over $170,000 a year. There were no books, there was no computer, there was nothing. And he was right. It did end up doing very well, but it was a lot more work than what I expected. And one, it was a small animal only practice, companion animal, whereas the previous practice was mixed practice, and there's obviously different dynamics there. But how I made it even worse, I exacerbated the challenge because I wanted to get ahead financially. So, and I share this in my book, The Abundant Practice. I bought a sheet metal factory. It was a managed business, and I thought, oh, this is good. It's a managed business. It's sheet metal, stainless. It's on the Gold Coast. What could go wrong? And of course, everything went wrong. And that decision it just about put us into bankruptcy, and it certainly put me into depression. Just because we were losing money kind of hand over fist. But I guess there's often a silver lining in these really tough scenarios. And mine was that what it did was I was so screwed financially. I was just in, complete despair that it forced me to get my ego out of the way and put my hand up. And I realized that I just have to learn how to make a business very profitable because there is no other way out here. It's either that or shut the door, get rid of my dreams, and it's game over. So as a result of that, I sort of immersed myself in developing myself and knowledge around mindset, marketing, leadership, finances. Those things you need to really create a successful business. Um, and I was learning from stuff outside the industry. Because there wasn't really something that was that targeted in the industry to really help you do it there. And I was bringing it in the industry and testing it in that little vet practice. And as a result, it grew about sixfold in 5 years and it became, really quite profitable. And, I was working 4 days a week and making, really good money out of this business. So I guess if I hadn't gone and got the sheet metal factory, which I look back and go, how dumb could I be? Like, obviously, it was crazy to do it. Um, but if I hadn't have done that, if the sheet metal factory had worked out, I'm not sure that I would have gone down this whole journey of developing myself, which means I wouldn't get the joy that I do today of helping others create really successful practices. I had to be sharpened on the grinding stone before I could actually help someone else do it. So I guess I'm a big believer in, there's a point to everything. Everything's got a reason.
Just to clarify, when you use the term turnover, that means revenue.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, because we don't use it in the same fashion. So I just want to clarify. So
Well, turnover there is the amount of actually turnover there. Does that relate to how many team members come and go?
that's pretty much what we use it for.
Right.
It's either that or a
Okay.
pastry that we get in the, at the bakery. Um, so, uh, I didn't prep you for this question, but I'm going to ask it anyhow, which is during that time of self-awareness, self-development, self-teaching, you said you looked outside of the industry for resources. Do you have one, two, three, either books or speakers or authors or resources that you tapped into that were memorable that are still on your bookshelf?
Well, actually, in the back, I have a bookshelf and I have it allocated into my categories and I have sort of my top 20. And I
Okay.
go, if I had to read books, they're the ones that I'll read again and again because they're just right on point. And after times with reading books, you get to a point that it's kind of the same stuff, said in a slightly different angle. And, you're not probably getting as much value from it. So I think some of I responded to this email and it said something amazing has happened, dot, dot, dot. And I thought that's interesting. And it was a real estate investing company. They said the amazing thing is they've got this guy that can teach you how to make money out of your business. And I went to that seminar. It's called How to Make Stacks of Cash. And I thought, geez, I could do with that right now. Um, so I guess in terms of the resource that made the biggest flick for me, it was going to a live event that was around the particular thing I needed. And that was like Pandora's box got open. It was like someone showed me a completely different universe of business that I wasn't aware of. And, that was certainly a big transition for me. And it was from someone who'd actually done it. I think there's a lot of people bumbling around on stages and, experts who it's kind of theoretical. It's not, they haven't actually been forged in the fire to create that. So that was one thing that was instrumental. And he ended up as my mentor. I ended up, and I remember going to this event and I think it was $700 to go to this event. And I was like, whoa, I don't have $700. Like it put me so far out of my comfort zone. That's how broke we were. I had to use frequent, points to get there to flying and all that sort of stuff. But I remember walking up and saying to my wife, everything's going to be okay, I think. It's like someone showing me the way through. So I think sometimes the resource is someone who can give you hope. And that was number one for me. I needed hope because I didn't believe it could happen. Number two, read books. There's a great book. Oh God, I'm trying to think of the Big Leap. It's a book called The Big Leap. And what it talks about is upper thresholds, that we all have these upper thresholds of how much love we believe we can get, health we believe we can have, wealth we believe we can have, clients we believe we can get. And really it's a book around this this limit that we all bump into regardless of where we are. And that book opened me up to the fact that the game to play was just about continuously stretching my upper limit. So that's one book when we're working with people, we'll often give that to them because it just opens up to a different way. Another book that I read that I found really insightful was the 80-20 principle. And understanding that the 80-20 principle applies in everything. So in my life, I look at where do I spend 80% of my time? Or what's the 20% of things I'll do that'll give me 80% of my results? And I apply this to marketing, to finance, to friends, to health, to travel. And I just found that perspective. They were talking about roads and they went 20% of roads take 80% of the traffic. And of the 20% of roads, there's a 20% of roads that take 80% of those. And it was like you sort of got more and more dialed in. And I think that book was really insightful because what it made me think about is don't be great at everything. Find the thing, the riches are in the niches, find the thing and become incredibly good at that. And I remember making a decision out of that. Well, what I need to do is just become incredibly good at how to make profit out of a vet practice. That was it. I didn't go to seminars on how to become a good vet. In fact, I've been to 3 in my entire life, which people will waggle the finger at me, I'm sure. But I knew I could employ good vets, but I couldn't employ someone who could show me or could make a vet practice really, really profitable. So I think those 2 books were quite insightful for me.
So essentially, simplify, pick the thing that you do best. And I love this quote. You said it awfully fast, so I'm going to repeat it. The riches are in the niches.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely correct. I think we sometimes try to be everything to everybody and don't focus on what we do really well. So at some point in time, Sam had an epiphany. And that epiphany was that if I could do it well, I could teach others to do it well. So how did you decide to move from the practice ownership and making practices profitable to the sage on the stage, so to speak, the educator, the coach, the consultant? What brought you to that epiphany, and how did you grow your consulting and coaching firm?
Kind of looking back, it's interesting. You know, and Steve Jobs talked about this in that great YouTube clip, the Stanford, the university address, and he talks about you can never connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. And I never, in my wildest dreams, was like, if you had told me back then when I was struggling that I'd be sitting here on a podcast chatting to, one of the most revered gurus in the vet space in the US, I would have said that's impossible. But I always talk about just take the next obvious step. So I remember my vet practice was struggling. And one of the things I went, how can I get some better buying prices? And there was a representative, a sales rep from Bowden, I think it was. And he was sitting there chatting. He said, I don't know why you vets don't get together and start a buying group. And back in those days, there weren't really buying groups. And I thought, that's a good idea. How do they work? And he gave me a contact who knew someone who'd started in a different industry. And so I ring up this person who was doing in the building space, actually. And I'm a big fan of saying, or I would say, I've never had a good idea. I just hear them, but I'm really good at implementing. So I ended up starting a buying group for vets. And we ended up with several hundred practices in that buying group. And that was all just so I could get better prices for myself. But as part of that, I had a coach, so I had a mentor, and he said to me, oh, you should do, he said, what you want to do in order to try and get people to try the buying group is you need to give something of really high value to them first, let them, a product or something. So I created this thing called the consult room process. And what I was really, really good in a consult room at getting clients to say yes to products or service that are analytically needed. So my average transaction value, I'm not sure what term you use in the US, Peter, that is a similar sort of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fine. And we call it average client transaction, average transaction value. It's got more acronyms than I care to tell you. So
yeah.
you're spot on. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just really good at getting yeses in the consult room. So what my coach said, he said, you've got to kind of break this down into a step-by-step process and sort of, deconstruct it. So I created this and I realized there was 9 clear steps I was doing in order to educate a client to value. So they saw the value in the stuff and they went ahead and said yes. It also educated me to value so that I felt this is valuable. So therefore, when it came to price, there was no kind of that icky moment where you're going, oh, the client going to say yes or no. So I created this thing and then I gave it to a few of my clients. This was back in the day where we had CDs and I put it on a CD that people used to listen to. And I realized I was onto something when one of my friends rang me up and said, that thing's incredible. He said, you should see what's happened to our average transaction value by just following that 9-step process. He says, we've gone up by like $40 or $50 per average transaction. And I've given it some of my team and they've gone up as well. So that was the first time I realized that, wow, decodifying or breaking into or componifying it makes something, I could make something transferable, some knowledge transferable to someone else so they could get a similar result. And then that was sort of like the first idea that I thought some of my stuff could actually help somebody else. Um, the next time was my coach said, well, maybe you should you've got all these these members of your buying group. Why not add some value to them? Why not do a teleconference? So this is starting to show my age. This is back in the day where everyone dialed in. You remember those days, people? You dialed in on the phone and everyone listened in and you had to push one button to record. So I went, oh, I want to try running this teleconference thing, and and I was really nervous, like super nervous. And my narrative in my mind, your scumbag voice, he goes, "You're an idiot. You're an idiot." And my scumbag voice was saying, "Well, you're probably going to stuff it up, and you'll end up looking like a muppet." So I thought, oh well. Anyway, we'll have a go at it. So I do this. I do this teleconference, and I got off and thought, "Yep, you did stuff it up and you sounded like a muppet." And then, bless their cotton socks, one of a couple of people who were on that, there was 6 of them on it. Like it was no big stage. There were 6 of us on this teleconference, and 2 of them actually rang up and said, that was really valuable. When are you doing another one? And I'm really grateful for those phone calls because they believed in me and saw value before I did. And I think, one of the learns is we're our own biggest critics. We're harder on ourselves than anyone else is. So that was sort of when I was actually my first forage into coaching. And I could never have thought that I'd be, standing on a stage in front of hundreds of people on running 3-day events and coaching and mentoring. It was never part of the game. It was just what was the next domino, the next domino. It just seemed like an obvious thing to do at the time rather than, heading towards some big goal.
Well, congratulations on that change because you have helped hundreds of people. And and I think there's a need in the profession for coaches like yourself. I think sometimes we are our own biggest critics, and I will be using that scumbag voice concept because we all have imposter syndrome, and that's basically the imposter in the back of our head. I've never called myself that before, but I guess I will now. Um, so, if you were to give a 35,000-foot overview of your coaching methodology and focus, I guess the one word is profit, but how do you communicate that? What are the tools that you use? What are some of the philosophies that you use because profit is a 4-letter word in the eyes of many veterinarians. It's a word we want to attain, but we don't want to use because frequently it's perceived in a negative fashion. So how do you get over the mindset that profit is a 4-letter word? What is it some of your methodology that you use to help others get past that mindset?
It's fascinating. Profit, and by the way, dear listeners, it's the same mindset in vet practices the world over. I mean, the world over. Um, I often say that we all want to make more profit, but we don't want anyone to know about it. Um,
Well put.
yeah. Um, when I look at, and I think profit is a one metric of success. You know, when we talk about abundant practice, to go, well, what is abundance? It's the feeling that everything's right. It's the feeling that everything's in flow. So enough time, the time to enjoy stuff, team, you've got a cracking team, you got plenty of clients coming in, you feel fulfilled, you've got the finances. So I think profit is a method of measurement of, is this process working? Because to me, people can say, I've got a really good team and, you know, clients really love me. I'm like, great, but I'm making 5% profit. And the challenge is then there's a part of your life out of sync because you're probably going to have to be working harder and you probably can't get away for holidays and things like that as much. So you might feel like you're missing out on other parts of life because of this one part of the business that's not quite right. So I think, to be honest, when we're working with practices, we don't tend to lead with profit because although they want it, they don't want anyone to know they're after it. So when we're looking at a business, the 30,000 foot view, as you put it, and I love that analogy, um, there's three parts of the process. There is clarity. What exactly do I want? The next part of the process is mindset. Do I have the mindset to get what I want? And the third part of the process is, well, what's the strategy that would allow me to get the outcome I want? So I once heard this saying, which I love, the fish stinks from the head down. And essentially, you know, if we look at results in a business, they are a mirror image of the way of thinking of the leadership of that business. So generally in vet practice, it's the business owner. And a common mistake that I see again and again is people go straight to strategy. Tell me the one thing I need to fix. And it's like you kind of need to go back a bit and go, well, if you've got no profit or you don't have the team you want, or you don't have the leverage, so you're really busy all the time, why have you created that? Because it's a way of thinking and therefore a way of doing things that has resulted in that. So we tend to go back to mindset quite a lot once we're clear on what we want. So let me give you an idea of strategy. Let's assume that a practice has got clarity and they say, okay, I want to get, let's pick a figure, 20% profit. By the way, to give you an idea of differences between industry, countries, in Australia, it used to be that 20% profit was like going really, really well. Then it's sort of moved to 30%, and we're now seeing some regional practices, companion animals, approaching nearly 40% net profit. Like they're making a $4 million practice and they're running that at high net profit. So it's kind of shaved what's possible. But let's assume a business says, I want to get to 20% profit. So the next step would be to understand, does the business owner believe that's actually possible? Or as you just alluded to, do they in their mind, is their subconscious, their scumbag voice going, yeah, but if you did that, you'd be ripping people off. You'd have to charge too much. And this is the mindset bit that will get in the way of the strategy working. So we always have to look at and understand what's our thinking, because we're creating, as humans, we're creating all the time. So once they believe it's possible, then you can actually look at the strategy. And let me give you an example of that. And this might be something that you, or if you're listening in, you can actually do in your practice this next week. One of the strategies we'll use, if we all have these financial thresholds, I talked about the big leap, it's kind of these upper thresholds of what we believe is possible for us. In a consult room, this plays out like this. There's what I call the factor. It's a very technical term. It's the factor. And that's where you're sort of thinking about things you know and talking to the client that need to be done. You get to the certain financial level where you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. It's a little bit of a tightening in the stomach. It's a little bit of like, oh, I don't want to talk to the client about this cost maybe. And what's happening is you're bumping into your financial threshold. Now, some vets will be $500 in the consult room. That'll be their financial threshold. Some will be $3,000. So for someone to become more profitable, we might have to lift that financial threshold. To some, if we've identified that this is a mindset challenge, we're like, okay, what's the strategy that we can use that'll automatically reset the mindset? And we'll say, I've done this a number of times, we'll say, okay, the next time we get together, you need to have, say they're at $500 as their threshold, you need to get to, say, $1,500 or $2,000 as a case that you've treated. And they'll leave in complete trepidation. Like you can almost palpably feel the fear that's going on in their head because I'm bumping into their mindset and the beliefs of what they think is possible for them. Then once they crack it, they'll come back and I just didn't do two, I did like five. It's like the 3 minute mile. The minute the belief shifts, all of a sudden the opportunity is all around us all day, every day. But we're not seeing it. We don't believe it's possible because of our mindset. Once that person's reset their threshold, it's set permanently. And this is one, and it's not by, oh, I charged heaps. What have you done? They've just been a good vet, done what would be good technical approach to it, and they've just charged fair and reasonable rates, but they've charged everything. They haven't started discounting everything to keep it under their threshold. So that's an example of how you're looking at, we've got clarity, then we've got mindset, then we've got strategy. So if we looked at a business specifically to give your listeners something they can actually do, and think about where are the areas you can look at that'll increase profit. Well, you think about, we always talk about what are the levers that you can pull. Obviously, pricing strategy. Let's look at where you've positioned yourself, how you're doing your pricing. The second area will be agreed standards of care between veterinarians. Often in multi-doctor practices, you will see that some are recommending at one level, someone sees a grade 1 dental and they book it in. Someone that's got to get to a grade 3 dental before they book it in. There's different standards of care. If you can standardize that and get everyone to have a high standards of care, we're going to be doing more workup, which of course is good medicine and good business. The third one is the ability to educate a client to value in the consult room, which means, and I never use the term sales skills within the consult room, but essentially it's influencing someone to say yes to something that is the ethically right thing for the animal to do. But that's asking them to spend their money and do stuff. And the fourth area is workflow efficiency. So how efficiently do we get that done? And I think in the US, you guys do a really good job of this. We're kind of copying there in your, vet techs. We call them vet liaisons in the consult room. They're speeding up. So a vet could be working 2 or 3 rooms at once and not having to do all the pieces. They're diagnosing, prescribing, and cutting. And the last area, of course, is your buying power. So you're getting your costs down, make sure you're buying it products. Buying the best you can. So they're the 5 areas that if someone are the strategies that you'd look at. And then of course, each of those areas has got subsets of things that you do.
It sounds like you have to start by getting the veterinarians out of their own way.
Well, if we're creating, that's where it starts every time. And I reckon, Peter, that's the confronting thing for many people is to put their hand up and say, my business isn't where I want it to be, and that's because of me. But that's also a very empowering moment because the minute they do that, it's opened them up, as it did with me. I had to get my ego completely knocked out by going nearly bankrupt and getting in depression to get to the level that I was prepared to say, I'm creating this. I can't blame anyone else. It's me. Yeah.
And a lot of what you're saying is a lot of what I've been proselytizing for years in terms of working on your business, not just in it. Own a job, don't own a job, own a business, and all the different things that you're talking about. But it really does start at the top from a leadership standpoint. So, you've been embedded in Australia since your lamb and sheep farm growing up, through a variety of different things. But you've also done some due diligence in the United States. So I'm going to combine 2 questions, which is, what are the issues in Australia that might be different in the U.S., and what are the things in the U.S. that you're using to learn from and help those in Australia? So where does some of the synergies exist, and where does some of the dichotomies exist in between the Australia and the United States veterinary clinical practices, business-wise?
Yeah. What I would say is when I'm talking to practices in different countries, I'm looking for similarities and I'm looking for nuances of what's different. I can say categorically and I'm sure, I know you've worked in other countries as well, Peter, and you've seen as you worked in many countries, that the the general problems, and we'll talk about the sort of five areas that I've identified that are the same the world over. So I would say a vet practice is a vet practice is a vet practice with nuances. Here's a few things I've learned from the US that I think is good, and we're you know getting more and more practice in Australia to do it, and it's your co-consulting model. And obviously, the vet is the most expensive part of the team. Let's make them as efficient as possible. So it's sort of been done in Australia, but not well previously. One of the reasons being is the cost of employment of less skilled individuals in Australia is higher than it is in the US. So vets would say, oh, yeah, that's a good idea, having someone leverage the vet, but then you've got to pay them, and therefore it's not as profitable. That's just a workflow issue. Once you get the workflow right, we work on $1 million worth of revenue per full-time vet equivalent, being your target to get to. If you're running at that in Australia, you'll be running that practice at 25 to 30% net profit. And is it doable? Yeah, because the 3-minute miles happen, and we've got, first of all, there's one vet, then there's two, and now there's lots of them doing $1 million and better. In a 38-hour work week, and not hammering themselves. That's just about leveraging the vets. And I think you guys were doing that. And to be honest, I think we grabbed that from and borrowed that from you, and then just tweaked it to our market. The one of the things that I think is different between Australia and the US, and I think this is more a cultural thing than an industry thing, is, as you've seen, Australians tend to be a little bit more focused on work-life balance, and probably more balance than work. What I see is there is this, in the US, it seems that to get ahead successfully, it's about how hard can you work, and it's just do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. And I think that that can become that becomes a challenge, in the way that if we're so busy just working on the business, working in the business, as you say, there's no time to step back and be a CEO as opposed to a technician. So what happens is, I'm too busy to stop and fix what's making me so busy. So I sort of say that people are too busy drowning to learn how to swim. And I mean, the E-Myth, and I know you co-wrote a book with Michael Gerber. It was one of the first books I read, and I kind of got that I should spend less time being a vet and more time being a CEO. So I think that the work ethic, which is so unbelievable in the US, like you only get 2 weeks annual leave, as I understand, is the sort of the norm. Like that would be murder in Australia. Everyone would, toss. There'd be an absolute military coup if that happened. It's a minimum of 4, and as business owner, I'm like, that should be 6 weeks a year, so you can go and have a cracking life. So I think there's differences there in the philosophy of work, and it's important to be really busy all the time. One of the ways this plays out is when we call it a practice diagnostic assessment. It's a series of questions to sort of understand where your marketing's at, your leadership, your finance, things like that. One of the questions I ask is, how are you feeling overall in your business? And often I've found this, and it is unique to the US. I haven't seen anywhere else. The comment may be, I feel like I'm overwhelmed. I feel like I'm flat out keeping up with things, which is just, I'm really, really, really busy, just getting through the workload. And then we ask a question, what is it that we could send you that you think you need the most amount of help with, that'll help your business the most? And it's nearly always marketing from practices in the US. So I'm really, really busy, but I want to get more clients. And in my mind, I would be thinking, the mindset of how could I become more leveraged would be more important, because otherwise we're going to stay on that wheel. The other thing that it seems to me, and I don't know if we've just had a lot of business coaches in the vet space, it's like when someone gets a practice over here, it's kind of considered normal. Well, get a business coach. You'd be mad not to. And you'll have more insight than this than me, but in Australia, getting a business coach is just considered the norm. It's almost considered, why wouldn't you get one? So I think there's a little bit of difference there, maybe just because the US market's so big. Um, so some of the things that I've looked at, what are the similarities? There's five categories that I've found talking to practices are similar. One is we've talked about mindset and psychology because it's pretty much the same the world over. What's wonderful about our industry, from my perspective, is people and animals don't tend to change anywhere in the world. They tend to have the same drivers, the same psychology, and the same needs. So it's not unlikely that we'd see similarities between countries with nuances. So the five critical areas that I see have the same challenges, and I call them opportunities, is obviously mindset, marketing. How do I find, serve, and keep my ideal clients? So what is the 20% of marketing that'll give me 80% of my results? Finances, understanding someone's relationship with money and wealth, and understanding the figures within their business. The fourth one is leadership. How do I find, align, and grow my ideal team? And then the last one is the workflow efficiency, is what 20% of tweaks will increase my production by 80%. So, so I'm being as efficient with the business as possible. And I found that irrespective of whether it's a large animal practice only, a small animal, an exotics, an emergency, anywhere in the world, it'll be within those five categories that I see the similarities of challenges and opportunities.
And I would concur. And I would start with leadership because I think that is the weakest point, but it's foundational to everything. And those practices that don't have a leader or really don't own a business, they own a job and they're just going about their business every day and they're great at the technical work, but they don't take the time. So I agree with everything that you said from that standpoint. So as we kind of try to get towards a wrap, I just want to talk about your business and have you share what Accelerate Practice Academy is, the services that you provide, and is it just a domestic to the Australia population, or does Accelerate Practice Academy have tentacles around the world? So if you can give a little bit of where Accelerate Practice Academy grew out of and what you do, that would be wonderful.
When I was running my practice, I was looking around saying, I just want someone to tell me what to do. I'll do it. Just tell me the short hack. I don't want to figure it out myself. And so the Accelerate Practice Academy was born from me having done it myself and spent an obscene amount of money on it. Maybe I'm just slow to actually figure out how to do it and then take it from other industries and tweak it and create it into a process that was highly predictable in terms of outcome for a practice. And so it came out of my own frustration of not being able to do it myself. And then when I saw the results was getting in other practices, I went, how can I then leverage this up? Because I could see this knowledge was transferable and it fixed what I see as the elements of veterinary industry that are the unfun elements. I mean, most vets will say it's just such a great industry to work in. If we could fix this leadership problem, if we could fix this financial problem, if we could fix this, I love being a vet, but I want to fix this stuff. So I just really, and I wanted to get the results myself. So seeing that I could get those results, could I help someone else to do it? That's where it was born. And I'm super proud. I think as entrepreneurs, we're not very good at giving ourselves a pat on the back, honestly. We're only our harshest critic, but I'm super proud of what we've created. I get really excited when I see someone start because I know where they're going to be in 2 years' time, and they have no idea the journey they're about to go on. Just in the last weekend, we were working with our alumni group, which are our more advanced practices, and there was two of them that had just tapped out. They've finished. They said, "Look, Sam, we're going to finish up." They'd been with us like 5 years, and they were so content. They'd sold. They were financially free and they're talking about the stuff they're doing afterwards and their kind of life after. And, they're like 45, 50, they're not old. And what I love was when they started the process, they were broke and they had no hope. And just to see that, it's the most wonderful, like that's the greatest payoff I could ever get. So I think it comes out of one, a desire to help others, to that passion of seeing that the process works. And to be honest, Peter, my burning desire is that if it works so well here, and we've tested in other countries, we've tested in the US, we've tested in Canada, we've tested in New Zealand, it gets the same results anywhere in the world. I just go, how cool is if we could fix those challenges within the industry, even if, I don't want to be the dude doing it. It's too big a job for me. But the process that we've got works so well. I'd love to help other people create that sort of, that sort of outcome. So really, what it does, it really works with business owners. And we say, I've spent 15 years trying to figure out how to put this into a short elevator pitch, if you like. But we help practice owners who want to increase profit between 100,000 to 400,000 additional a year. They want to decrease their consulting amount of time in the consulting room by 20% as business owners, and create a business that's less reliant upon you, so you can go out and enjoy those other aspects of life. So really, that's sort of the broad brush strokes of what we do and why we do it.
So if people want to learn more about Accelerate Practice Academy, if they want to learn more about the work that you do, if they want to learn more about Dr. Sam Bowden or Bowden, how do they do that?
Yeah, look, I think there's, as I said, there'll be different types of listeners. Some listeners are actually actively, proactively looking for going, geez, I want to do something, I want to change something. And I think, Tony Robbins, if I can borrow a line from your own Tony Robbins, which I love and I found very helpful. He said that, what if life happens for you, not to you? What's the gift in this? And to me, life's so short. It's like, Steve Jobs said this: if you get too many days wondering or questioning what you're doing and having things you don't like about your life, then change it. And so I'm such an advocate of, like, sometimes like me, you have to be a bit vulnerable, put your hand up and say, things aren't working, I need to do something about it. And as you said, own that, Sam is the problem. So a couple of things. One, if there's those, I'm happy to jump on and have a chat. If there's listeners who want to do something, maybe we can help, maybe we can't. You can go to our website, acceleratepracticeacademy.com, and you can click on there and organise to have a call with me. And we'll just have a chat. I will need to understand your situation. And if we can help, great. Happy to help. If not, or I know someone else, happy to point you in the right direction. But what I would say is, change starts with a decision. Do something. For others that are your listeners listening in, just a way of adding value to what you do, and I actually very much resonate with your approach, Peter, and your desire to help practices. What I'd like to do, for those that want to understand more around mindset, marketing, leadership, finances, it's all laid out in my book, The Abundant Practice. And what I'd be happy to do is, if listeners, they can just shoot me an email at info at acceleratepracticeacademy.com. Just say, listen to this podcast, and just in the subject line, put book please, and I'd be happy to shoot you a link to a digital copy of the book. It retails at $29, but honestly, I'd be happy to give that to your listeners for free, just as a way of, if I can help someone make one little step in the right direction, I'll feel like I've done some good here.
Well, Sam, I appreciate your insights, your overview, and your passion for the profession. And you said something about making one little step. I think one little step, I've been to Australia 5 or 6 times and I love it. So how do you convince them, the listeners? You're now not talking about Accelerate Practice Academy. I want you to tell the listeners how wonderful Australia is and why they need to come and visit you.
Well, there's one downside. It is chocker full of Australians, right? I think, I think everybody thinks their country is the best country in the world. I think that's a lovely way to look at. I think one of the insights talking to people that have visited Australia is to expose themselves to this kind of more laid back approach. And I was talking to one of my friends. He's a very, very, very wealthy real estate developer. And I was talking about this sort of more laid back attitude that Australians, like, honestly, on the Gold Coast, if there's good surf on, all of a sudden people are going, I got to go surfing, I'm not working. Like, I think we may have pushed the needle too far, to be honest with you. But he said, yeah, but look what's available on our doorstep. And I think for people to come and expose themselves to the Australian way of life, which is very, it's very outdoorsy. It's, beach. It's hanging out with your friends. It's surfing. It's hiking. But I think the outcome is one bit of feedback I got from people who had visited from other countries is to spend some more time doing other things in life rather than just working, like a little bit more of that work-life balance. And I think I think Australians tend to be less stressed than other countries that I've observed. The other thing about Australians is, I think people might find interesting, we don't tend to take ourselves too seriously. We have something over here called tall poppy syndrome. And tall poppy syndrome is if, you don't want to be self-promoting yourself, which kills me all the time because I do it. I'm constantly self-promoting myself. But it's one of the things that in Australia, the guy who's doing really well, everyone's sort of taking sniper shots at them. Whereas it's one thing I do appreciate about the US, you almost champion people getting up and having a go and doing really well. It's kind of like it's seen as a really good thing. But I think it's an adventure to go to Australia. It's quite a trip. And so I find that by the time people come down, they're like, let's give it a go. Let's have a go at everything. And I know I get a kick out of showing anyone around because, I'd go, like when you come over, Peter, I'm going to teach you how to surf, of course, which I'm looking forward to immensely.
Maybe you should teach me how to swim first. No, I know how to swim. It's okay. And you didn't mention koalas and kangaroos and echidnas and spiders that chase you down the hall and snakes that can kill you. But it's a wonderful country, and it's a wonderful people. And I have a tremendous bias of appreciation for all that Australia has done for me. And I have a tremendous appreciation for Sam for taking time to share your insights with me. Final words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think it's really, if it was anything, it was that life happens. I'll tell you one little story that'll show you. This saying, life happens for you, not to you. What's the gift in it? And life is about perspective. Everyone trundles through life. We all have different things happen to us. How we feel is going to be based on our perspective, our framework, our psychology. And we're always teaching people we work with to use what I call gift glasses. So when anything happens that's bad, instead of going, this is terrible, we ask, what's great about this? And because if life happens for you, not to you, what's great about this? And I remember I've got a little 4.5 meter tinny, like a boat. We call it a tinny. I don't know why. Probably because it's made of aluminium, it's tin. So anyway, it's a little boat and we've got a little a holiday house on a little island. And I'd gone over to that. I put my boat in at the boat ramp. I leave my boat, my trailer was locked to a tree. And anyway, I came back 2 days later and I don't have any boat trailer. Someone has come in because now power tools, like battery tools, angle grinder, and they can grind the chain off, and they had stolen my trailer, which wasn't a valuable trailer. And what was fascinating was I was sitting there and it was almost like watching my brain do this thing, and my brain went straight to, oh, cool, what's great about this? It was like I took a double take and I went, you moron, like you've got a boat and you've got a car, you just don't need the bit in the middle called a trailer to get it home. But it was fascinating to watch my brain switch to what's great about this. And that's when I realized that how powerful sort of personal development work can be, in that I didn't feel frustration. I didn't get angry. In fact, I felt empathy for the person because I thought, far out, the poor person that has to steal my trailer, which is probably worth $2,000 on a good day, that must be really sad for them. And so just being able to navigate life without frustration and stress and worry, which I used to have a lot more of it. Now I just have less of it because I'm looking to see what's great about this. And to complete the story, what was great about it, I didn't get the trailer back. I put a little letter in. There was a house right next to it that I saw had some video surveillance. So I wrote a little letter and said, hey, listen, our boat trailer's been stolen. If you've got any footage, if you can help out at all, would you let me know? Gave them my phone number. Of course, I never expected to hear anything from them. Literally an hour later, I get this phone call. And it was from this guy, and he said, "Yes, I live there." He said, "So, like in Australia, stealing your boat trailer is the lowest crime you could possibly ever do to a human." Like he was mortified, and he said, "That's just terrible. Sorry that's happened. No, I've checked the video footage. There's nothing there that's going to help you. But I tell you what, I have a compound here next to the marina. You are welcome. Here's my gate code. You are welcome to leave your trailer in here anytime so it can never be stolen again." And I thought, wow, what a great lesson. There's always people that are struggling, but there's also wonderful people as well. If whatever you focus on expands, where do I choose to focus? So I just chose to focus that aren't people amazing, aren't they wonderful? So I think if that line, if life happens for you, not to you, I reckon it's a pretty good guidance that's served me well over the years.
Well, I will say if somebody would ask me what's great about this podcast today, it's you. And thank you.
It's been a pleasure and an honor.
So thank you for listening to today's podcast. We look forward to creating future episodes for you. If you like today's broadcast, we invite you to listen to other podcasts listed on our website or podcast platforms. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on the social media platforms listed on our website. Until next time, please reach out to Sam. Let him know how great he is because he's great about this. And please follow us at www.unfilteredvet.com. And let's see if I got everything. Unfilteredvetdiscussions.com. And we look forward to sharing some more in the near future. Everybody be well. Bye now. Wait, I'm supposed to do this like I'm a flight
The
attendant.
Queen, the
The
Queen.
Queen, the Queen. That's right. All right. Wait a second. Cancel. I want to stop the recording.